Imagine training for months to run a marathon. You are completely dedicated.
Right, you put in all the hours.
Exactly. Your lungs are ready. You're entirely committed to running those 26.2 miles. But then on race day, someone hands you a pair of running shoes that are like 3 sizes too small.
Oh man, that sounds like a nightmare scenario.
Right. But you lace them up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You start running, and eventually the blisters and the pain just become completely unbearable. So you stop.
Yeah, I mean, you have to.
But did you fail because you lacked willpower? Or did you fail because the shoes were just fundamentally the wrong fit?
See, when people fail in that specific scenario, they almost never blame the shoes. I mean, they blame their own feet.
Wow, yeah. That is so true.
They look at everyone else running past them, and they internalize this purely mechanical mismatch as like a deeply personal moral failure. They think they just don't have what it takes to cross the finish line.
Well, today, we are applying that exact question to one of the most stubborn and pervasive habits in modern society, the nightly drink.
It is such a massive topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack this surprisingly taboo area. Like, what do you do when you desperately want to change your drinking habits, but the traditional recovery frameworks, like walking into a church basement for a 12-step meeting, just do not fit your feet?
And we have some incredible source material to guide us today.
We do. We are pulling insights from the work of Susan Gast. She's the creator of Live Better Sober, and she's actually been alcohol-free for over 25 years.
Which is amazing, and her entire philosophy is built around practical, habit-based recovery rather than adopting lifelong labels.
Exactly. So to you, listening right now, whether you are, a psychology nerd, fascinated by how human beings change, or maybe you're quietly reevaluating your own evening wind-down routine, or even just trying to support a loved one, this deep dive is going to completely reframe how you view stubborn habits.
It really shifts the entire conversation. We're moving away from treating habit change as this test of moral character.
Right.
And instead, we're looking at the actual neurological mechanics of our daily routines.
So let's start with that marathon analogy. Who are the runners that these traditional shoes are failing?
Well, we are looking at a demographic that Susan explicitly calls the nightly drinker.
Okay.
And this represents this massive, largely invisible gray area in our culture. These are individuals who function at an incredibly high level on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, they're crushing it at their morning meetings. They manage their teams. They take care of their kids. They pay the mortgage on time.
Exactly. To the outside observer, their lives look like picture-perfect stability.
So they don't look like the cinematic rock-bottom stereotype of severe alcoholism that pop culture has kind of ingrained in us.
Not at all. There are no DUIs, no lost jobs, no public meltdowns.
But that creates a problem, right?
A huge problem. Because they lack those severe external consequences, they find themselves trapped in a really agonizing middle ground.
Like a cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. They know in the quiet of their own minds that their nightly drinking has become this compulsive loop they can't seem to break.
Yeah.
But because their lives aren't visibly falling apart, they tell themselves, it can't be that bad. I made it to the gym this morning.
And that dissonance causes them to delay seeking any kind of structural help for years, sometimes even decades.
Right. Susan actually shares a fascinating anecdote in the source material that perfectly captures this invisibility.
Oh, yeah, the newspaper story.
Mm.
She was in her late 20s working at a local newspaper, and she casually found out that one of her most reliable, put-together colleagues regularly attended AA meetings.
She was completely stunned.
She wrote that she never in a million years would have guessed he wrestled with a drinking problem.
And it just proves you cannot accurately audit someone's internal chaos based on their external competence. I mean, a person can hold a tremendous amount of internal friction while still delivering spreadsheets perfectly on time.
Wow, that is such a good way to put it. So knowing she had a non-judgmental colleague, Susan actually decided to test the waters. She mentioned she might be interested in attending a meeting with him.
Right. She took that brave first step.
But the moment she walked into that room, she felt this overwhelming sense of dread. She describes herself as naturally shy.
Yeah, the mere expectation that she would have to stand up in a room full of strangers, command their attention, and declare, "Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm an alcoholic," it just felt entirely alien and overwhelming to her.
It was the wrong pair of shoes.
Exactly. This highlights a fundamental divergence in what different human beings need to feel safe while making a major life change.
I mean, some people thrive in that.
They do. Certain personalities absolutely thrive in group-centric, identity-based environments. Adopting the recovery identity, finding a sponsor, having that rigid community, it provides them with the exact accountability they crave. The shoes fit perfectly.
But for Susan, and for millions of others, that framework feels restrictive, almost suffocating. They aren't looking for a lifelong identity project.
No, they simply want their evenings back. They want to stop waking up at 3 in the morning with a racing heart.
Yeah, they want to experience a Friday night without constantly calculating, like, how much alcohol is left in the fridge. They want behavioral freedom, not a completely new persona.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Our whole cultural narrative says that if you won't admit you're an alcoholic, you are just in deep denial. The prevailing wisdom is that you have to surrender to the label to get better. So how is Susan's approach not just giving people permission to stay in denial and avoid the hard work?
That is the exact societal friction point Susan addresses, and it's so important. We have to separate the desire to heal from the willingness to use a specific vocabulary word.
Okay, so rejecting the label does not equal rejecting change.
Precisely. If the mandatory requirement to stand up and call yourself an alcoholic acts as a massive psychological barrier, a barrier that keeps a person drinking every single night for another 10 years because they are too intimidated to seek help, well, then the label requirement is the structural failure, not the person.
Wow, you're saying the barrier to entry is keeping the people out who just need a tune-up rather than an engine replacement.
That is a great analogy, and we have extensive clinical research backing this up. Recovery and habit change are demonstrably not one-size-fits-all.
Right.
Pushing someone to adopt a framework that feels entirely inauthentic to their lived reality usually results in them abandoning the effort entirely. Prioritizing practical, measurable behavior change over a lifelong identity is a highly valid, scientifically supported starting point.
Okay, so if the core problem for this nightly drinker isn't a massive identity-shattering addiction, but rather a stubborn behavioral loop, what is actually keeping them stuck?
A good question.
Like, why can't a highly functional, successful person just decide to stop doing something they don't want to do anymore?
Well, we have to move away from the concept of identity and look at the actual physical mechanics of the human brain. The brain is a massive energy hog.
Yeah, it uses a lot of calories.
Exactly. So to save energy, it takes any repetitive behavior and moves it out of the conscious decision-making part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and it shoves it down into the basal ganglia.
And the basal ganglia runs our automatic subconscious routines.
Right. Susan outlines this as the classic habit loop.
The source material breaks this down into 4 distinct stages, actually. There is the trigger, the action, the temporary relief, and the repeat.
And let's examine how insidious that trigger can be. It rarely looks like a dramatic, shaking craving. For the nightly drinker, the trigger is usually environmental or emotional.
It's the sound of the laptop snapping shut at 5:30 p.m.
Exactly. Or it is the internal monologue whispering, I survived today, now I can finally relax.
Sometimes, as Susan points out, it is simply the overwhelming desire for the brain to just switch off after a day of overstimulation.
Yes. And I want you, the listener, to really think about this right now. Think about your own front door.
Yep. Good trick.
When you walk through it after a highly stressful day, what is the very first automatic action your brain reaches for to decompress?
Is it opening the fridge? Is it doom scrolling on your phone for an hour? Is it turning on the television?
Right. The substance or the action might be different, but we are all chasing that exact same momentary relief where the brain just gets to power down.
And once that specific loop, the trigger, the action, the relief, is hardwired into the basal ganglia, it just runs like background program on a computer.
And this is exactly why highly functional people feel so much shame. They desperately want to stop, they promise themselves they will stop, and then they find a glass in their hand at 7 p.m., almost as if they were sleepwalking.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring error in how we try to fix these things. The complete failure of pure motivation.
Oh, absolutely.
People get caught in this loop, and they tell themselves, tomorrow I'll just try harder, I'll use my willpower. But willpower is basically the battery on your smartphone.
That is the perfect way to look at it. Willpower lives in that prefrontal cortex we mentioned earlier, and it requires an immense amount of cognitive energy to operate.
So you wake up in the morning, and your willpower battery is at 100%. You are full of motivation. You tell yourself, tonight I am drinking sparkling water, period.
And then reality hits.
Right. You navigate a stressful Zoom meeting, you sit in gridlock traffic, you manage a toddler's meltdown.
And by the time 5 p.m. rolls around, your willpower battery is completely drained. It is flashing red at 2%.
Yeah. And when you hit that environmental trigger like walking into your kitchen, you simply do not have the battery life to manually override the automatic loop.
When the battery is dead, the brain just defaults to its most deeply ingrained programming to find relief. Relying on willpower is like expecting your phone to stream a 4K movie when it's on low power mode.
It is physically impossible. Okay, I buy the battery analogy. Willpower fails. So what is the alternative? Susan says the solution is structure.
Right, structure.
If willpower is your phone's battery, structure is like finally taking a charging cable and plugging that phone directly into a wall outlet.
I love that. You are no longer relying on a depleting reserve of energy. You are relying on a continuous, reliable, external system.
But practically speaking, what does plugging into the wall actually look like for someone at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday?
Well, plugging into the wall means creating external constraints and new behavioral pathways, so you just don't have to make a choice in the moment. It means relying on environmental design.
Give me an example.
Sure. So, for example, it could be pre-booking a non-refundable workout class at 6 p.m. with a friend who expects you to be there.
Oh, so you can't back out.
Right. Or it could be completely removing the alcohol from the house so that the friction required to get a drink involves, putting on shoes, finding your keys, and actually driving to a store.
You are outsourcing the discipline to your environment.
Exactly. The structure makes the choice for you, so your drained battery doesn't have to.
That makes total sense. And it explains a phenomenon the source material points out, why quitting feels so easy for the first 3 days and then suddenly becomes nearly impossible around day 7 or day 10?
Yes. During those first few days, your motivation battery is artificially supercharged by the sheer novelty and excitement of making a major life change.
Adrenaline is carrying you.
But by day 7, the novelty evaporates. The stress of normal life returns, the battery dies.
And if you haven't built a wall outlet, if you haven't redesigned your evening structure, that automatic basal ganglia loop just pulls you right back into the old habit.
Exactly.
So if we aren't walking into a church basement for a 12-step meeting, what are the actual blueprints for these alternative wall outlets? Susan outlines an incredibly rich landscape of options for people who need something different. Let's dig into the mechanics of these.
Let's do it.
First on her list is smart recovery.
Right. So smart recovery is deeply rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It completely discards the concept of powerlessness and instead treats habit change like a skill you can learn and master.
Can we break down the mechanics of CBT in this context? Like, how does SMART actually intercept that habit loop we talked about?
Sure. Think of CBT like installing an ad blocker in your brain.
Okay.
When that 5 p.m. trigger hits and the thought arises, I need a drink to shut my brain off, CBT teaches you to treat that thought like a glitchy pop-up ad on your computer screen.
You don't blindly click the link.
Exactly. You pause, you observe the pop-up, you recognize it as just a temporary neurological misfire, and you actively use tools to click the X and close the window. You learn to dismantle the irrational belief that you cannot survive the evening without the action.
That is highly analytical. I mean, you are literally debugging your own thoughts. But what if someone isn't wired that way? What if analyzing their thoughts just makes them more anxious?
That leads perfectly to the second alternative, which is recovery dharma. This appeals to a completely different sensibility. It is a Buddhist-inspired, mindfulness-based community.
So different from CBT.
Very. If smart recovery is about actively fighting and debugging the thought, recovery dharma is about radical acceptance and presence.
How does mindfulness practically stop someone from pouring a drink, though?
Through a practice often called surfing the urge. Instead of fighting the craving, which honestly often makes it stronger, you learn to sit quietly and observe the physical sensations of the craving in your body.
Like watching a wave.
Exactly. You watch the urge rise like a wave, peak, and eventually crash and dissipate. You learn through meditation that cravings are just weather patterns passing through your nervous system.
You don't have to act on them. You just have to outlast them.
Precisely.
Another fascinating option mentioned is Women for Sobriety. This is a framework specifically designed by and for women, focusing heavily on self-esteem and emotional growth. Why is a gender-specific structure sometimes the necessary wall outlet?
Well, because the environmental triggers and societal conditioning women face are often distinctly different. The cultural normalization of like mommy wine culture, the disproportionate burden of emotional labor, the pressure to be perfect, these create a very specific type of exhaustion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A space dedicated to dismantling those specific pressures and replacing feelings of guilt with feelings of empowerment, it addresses the root cause of the trigger in a way a generalized group might just miss.
And for the true introverts, the people like Susan who felt paralyzed by the idea of group sharing, the text points to private therapy or recovery coaching.
Yes, a great option.
You still get the accountability of the wall outlet, but the blueprint is highly customized and completely confidential. You're working one-on-one to untangle your specific triggers without an audience.
It provides the vital ingredient of external accountability without the overwhelming sensory input of a group dynamic.
Finally, there are purely habit-based systems, which is where Susan's own course, 66 Days to Break the Nightly Drinking Habit, lands. These systems strip away the psychoanalysis and the labels entirely. The text refers to this as utilizing behavioral architecture.
Behavioral architecture means literally rearranging the furniture of your life so that the path of least resistance leads to a new habit rather than the old one.
Give me an example of that.
Well, you aren't digging into your childhood trauma. You are analyzing your 6 p.m. routine. If you usually sit in a specific chair and pour a drink, behavioral architecture means you move the chair.
Well, literally moving furniture.
Yes, you change the lighting in the room, and you have a specialized, complex mocktail already pre-made in the fridge. You are altering the physical cues that trigger the basal ganglia.
Okay, I have another logistical pushback here.
Go.
With so many vastly different options, from debugging thoughts with CBT, to surfing urges with mindfulness, to rearranging your living room furniture, how does someone actually choose? Like, does treating this like a buffet and jumping between smart, dharma, and coaching just create more chaos and prevent real momentum?
That is probably the most critical question in modern recovery. The strategy is absolutely not to bounce randomly from method to method the moment things get difficult.
Jumping around is just avoiding the work.
Exactly. It's often a sophisticated form of procrastination. The strategy is to conduct an honest audit of your own personality before you begin and choose the framework you can realistically live with day after day.
You have to find the shoe that actually matches the shape of your foot.
Perfectly said. If you are an analytical problem solver who loves data, a habit-based tracker or smart recovery is going to feel incredibly validating.
Yeah.
But if you're deeply introspective and seek inner peace, recovery dharma is going to feel like coming home. The core insight from Susan's work is that the specific method matters far less than the consistency.
It is about choosing a system that feels sustainable for your specific life, plugging into that wall outlet, and letting the structure do the heavy lifting while your brain slowly rewires itself.
Absolutely.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today on the mechanics of habit change. Let's distill this deep dive down to the 3 most vital takeaways.
Sounds good.
Number 1, the traditional 12-step model is a lifesaver for many, but it is not the only pair of shoes. If adopting a lifelong label feels paralyzing, you are not necessarily in denial. You might just require a different mechanical approach.
Right. And number 2, pure motivation is a myth. Willpower is a faulty battery that is guaranteed to die when you are stressed and tired. Lasting change only happens when you build a wall outlet using environmental design, CBT tools, or mindfulness to make the new choice automatic.
And number 3, you do not need to hit a cinematic rock bottom to want a better life. Wanting to sleep through the night, wanting to wake up with a clear head, and wanting a brain that isn't constantly negotiating with alcohol are completely valid, standalone goals. You are allowed to just want peace.
So true. And to you, listening right now, whether you are auditing your own evening routines or you are watching a friend struggle to break a loop they desperately want out of, understanding these structural mechanics changes everything.
It really does.
It allows us to replace moral judgment with genuine curiosity. Instead of asking, why can't they just try harder, we can start asking, what kind of environmental structure is missing here?
It shifts the entire paradigm from shame to strategy, which brings us right back to the starting line of that marathon.
Yeah.
If we now understand that pure willpower is a terrible tool for breaking a nightly drinking habit, and that structural behavioral architecture is the actual secret to crossing the finish line. It's the actual secret to crossing the finish line.
Yeah.
Then what other stubborn areas of your life are you currently trying to fix with raw motivation when what you really need is to completely redesign your system?
That is a powerful question, and it applies to far more than just what's in our glass at the end of the day.
It definitely does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.